Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I know that I talk a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure and response prevention therapy, and I realized that I have never really talked in depth, so I wanted to start talking in depth about what exposure and response prevention looks like and what cognitive behavioral therapy looks like and things along those lines. So back in the day when I went to an intensive outpatient program for OCD, they gave me and my parents a handout that was called the OCD Glossary, which had a lot of different terms that are commonly used in the OCD world that other people wouldn't know. So I wanted to break that out today and show you guys the OCD Glossary in order to kickstart the series I'm going to be doing about ERP. I think it'll really help you guys to know what I'm saying if you don't already know. So I broke out this. This is my mental health binder. You might notice that it is the same design as my wallpaper. I also have a pencil box in this design. I don't know if it was on purpose. When I first started at the OCD program, they gave us a folder, a yellow folder that we were supposed to keep all of our exposure stuff in. That is long gone. It's been torn to pieces, drawn all over, really worn out. So eventually I broke down and I was like, all right, I don't want to retire this, but I have to. I'm gonna get a bigger binder to hold all of my stuff because I continued the habit of using a folder for my therapy from that point on. I also have a journal for it. I thought they were really good ideas. I know that there were some kids in the program who were like, when I'm done, I'm gonna burn this folder. For me, like, I knew that this was I'm going to have to keep going to therapy, so that was one thing. But also, I just thought it was a really good way to keep everything together. So I kept up the habit. I kept doing it. And so what I have in here are a lot of worksheets. This is all my exposure stuff. As you can see, there's pictures. Maybe it's real. Classic exposure sticky notes right here. I have a lot of different handouts that I've gotten over the years, hierarchy pages, which we're gonna go over that next time. And yeah, and then I have all these things that I gotten from my therapist. Then there's a bunch of other mental health stuff. Me venting about my feelings, stuff like that. I looked through this and scoured through it to find the glossary, and it wasn't in there. So I have no idea why, because I thought that I would keep it because I try to keep everything from this era. I'm very nostalgic for it, but I couldn't find it, so I must have thrown it away at some point. I have no idea what happened to it. I really thought I would have had it. You know what? I'm gonna make my own. Okay, I'm back, and I made an OCD glossary. First, we'll start with CBT. That's cognitive behavioral therapy. That is an evidence-based therapy, which means that it's been proven by evidence to help, and it helps many different kinds of disorders. We also use it in treating OCD and related disorders. So CBT basically is the combination of two different types of therapies: behavioral therapy and cognitive therapy. Cognitive therapy focuses on thoughts and changing thoughts in order to help influence your feelings. So they believe that thoughts are the main drive of feelings, and feelings influence our behaviors, and it's all a cycle. So change your thoughts, you'll change your feelings, you'll change your behaviors. Behavioral therapy believes that if you can change your behaviors, you'll change your feelings in a way, and it uses the learning theory, like you might have heard of Pavlov's dogs and that kind of thing. He was a behaviorist. It uses conditioning and learning theory in order to help a specific problem and condition you out of fearing over something. Next, we have comorbid. Comorbid, or co-occurring disorders, or comorbidities. That means that someone has multiple different disorders, or that two disorders tend to run together. So we often say that Tourette syndrome and OCD are highly comorbid because they often go together in patients. Depression and OCD, very comorbid. Anorexia and OCD, very comorbid. They often come together. Then we have compulsions. A compulsion is a symptom of OCD in which a person feels pressured to do a certain behavior, whether that's mental or physical, to relieve anxiety brought about by an obsession. And we might as well just do obsessions now. An obsession is a reoccurring thought that causes distress. And then we have SUDS. SUDS stands for the subjective unit of distress. That means that you rate your level of distress when you're doing an exposure and response prevention therapy, or if you're just anxious in general, you rate your level of distress by the SUDS scale. There's a lot of different ways to go about doing a SUDS scale. Some places do 1 to 100, some do 1 to 10. I think Rogers in Wisconsin does 1 to 7, which I find weird. But regardless, whatever you learn with, whatever you choose, it doesn't really matter. You're still rating the same thing. I've been to a therapist who did 1 to 100. She was a CBT therapist, but didn't really know how to treat OCD, but she tried though. And I really really didn't like the 1 to 100 system. I felt like it was too much, too many options. So I ended up just going by 10s and 5s anyway. So when I went to the OCD program and they used a 1 to 10 system, I was a lot happier. That said, this might just be an OCD kids thing, but there's also a SUDS thermometer, and that is the thing that you rate your SUDS level on. You could also call it like a SUDS scale. We used to have pictures of thermometers. You can tell I went to a kids program, and basically like 10 is the highest and you're like spewing out of the thermometer. The mercury is like shooting out the top, and then lowest is like 1 or 0. You're at the very bottom of the thermometer. It's, you know, it's a metaphor. Don't laugh at me. We also named and drew our OCD a lot. It was enjoyable. So next we have rumination. Rumination is when a person obsessively thinks, I shouldn't say obsessive, it'll get confusing. Rumination is when a person obsessively thinks about a negative event or an aspect of life, and this affects their day-to-day well-being, their mood, and their relationships. Rumination can also be a compulsion. And then there's exposure and response prevention therapy. Exposure and response prevention therapy, ERP, is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy. So exposure therapy can be used for any kind of anxiety disorder, and exposure therapy is specifically the gold standard treatment for OCD. And we call it exposure and response prevention therapy when we're treating OCD, because exposure and response prevention means you're exposing to the thought, right, with the E, you're exposing to the feared situation slowly and at a comfortable pace, and then the R, you prohibit the response to that fear. You hold off from doing compulsions. You're exposed to that fear, then you don't do compulsions. I might have totally like over-explained that, but yeah. Next we have the DSM-5. The DSM-5 stands for the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. The American Psychological Association puts out this every few years with the updated guidelines on diagnosing disorders. That's basically all it is. There are other versions of this in other countries. And then the 5 refers to the fact that it's the 5th edition. Next we have the hierarchy. The hierarchy is a list of possible exposures for you to do, listed from the highest to the lowest SUDS rating. Now the thing with exposure therapy is that you're going to start from the easiest exposures. Usually it's called gradual exposure. Start from the easiest exposures and move up to the highest. Some people don't do that. Some people do an interspersed kind of exposure, so it more accurately mimics real life. That is also okay, but we also have the SUDS rating and the hierarchy in order to help us out in choosing which exposures are best. And then there's flooding, which would be going to the very top of the hierarchy, which some psychologists do, but most don't. Next we have mindfulness, which is the practice of being present in the moment, and it's a big part of DBT. DBT is another type of CBT called dialectical behavioral therapy. It is not a treatment for OCD directly, but a lot of OCD patients end up going to DBT. It is actually a treatment for your mood and interpersonal problems and self-harm and things like that. Yeah, a lot of people with OCD end up struggling with those things, so it often is an adjunct to treating the OCD. Next we have, let's go to panic disorder. And panic disorder is a disorder in which someone has reoccurring panic attacks. They are not triggered by anything that the person knows about usually. It's just really random reoccurring panic attacks. And often the person with panic disorder ends up having a fear of having a panic attack in general. So then let's go up to avoidance. Avoidance is when you avoid doing a certain behavior in order to avoid the anxiety associated with that behavior. Avoidance is also treated as a compulsion in OCD. Then there's accommodation. Accommodation is something that's very prevalent in OCD sometimes. So accommodation is essentially when someone else helps the OCD sufferer with their compulsions. For example, parents helping their children perform compulsions, or siblings or spouses, partners, friends, roommates, anything that you have someone else do to help with your compulsions. So like if it's mom having to not say a certain word, or having to wash her hands a certain amount of time before she cooks your food, something like that. Or like when my parents slept in my room with me because I was scared of the dark, that was accommodation. It's not good. It's not good. Accommodation is a big no-no because it also reinforces OCD. Even though it's hard to see your OCD sufferer in your life struggle, you still can't do it. It's not good for the OCD sufferer. So next we have agoraphobia. And agoraphobia is a fear of going certain places or going out in public at all. And it's often associated with fear of an embarrassing thing happening, an embarrassing event or situation happening, and being unable to escape. This can often lead to people being confined to their homes because they're too scared to leave their houses. Next, we have mental rituals. Mental rituals are rituals and compulsions. Rituals, oh, I forgot to mention, another word for compulsion is a ritual. So mental rituals are compulsions that occur inside your head. So some examples would be something that I used to do was praying over and over again, or reciting certain phrases over and over again, like I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, until it feels right and your anxiety goes away. Anything that you do to relieve anxiety is a compulsion. Then there's insight. Insight is the amount to which you believe an obsession is rational, logical, and true. Like how much do you believe this obsession? A lot of people with OCD have high insight and they find that they know that this obsession is illogical, yet they still feel pulled to do the compulsion. Some people have low insight. This is especially common in children, and they don't realize that the compulsion is irrational and that the obsession is irrational and the compulsion won't actually help anything. So it can be a lot harder to treat someone with low insight. I had low insight when it came to my scrupulosity obsessions, which is obsessions around religion or morality, which is obsessions around religion or morality. So I wasn't sure if OCD was speaking to me or if it was actually God. That would be considered a form of low insight because I thought the obsessions were real. Next we have HRT. So HRT is called habit reversal therapy, and it is used to treat tic disorders such as Tourette syndrome or a miscellaneous tic disorder. This is brought up because tic disorders and OCD are highly comorbid together, and habit reversal therapy is actually a lot like exposure and response prevention in some ways, but a little bit different. Essentially, the goal is to reduce tics, and HRT employs competing behaviors. Essentially, in my understanding, are behaviors that you do instead of doing the tic. So you get an urge to do a tic, like jerking your arm, and instead you move something else, something like that. And then there's emetophobia. Emetophobia is another type of phobia. I mean, agoraphobia, I forgot to mention this was a phobia, a specific phobia, and then emetophobia is also a specific phobia, but they are often comorbid with OCD. So emetophobia is an extreme fear of vomiting, and it goes over and above any normal fear of vomiting. Like, no one likes vomiting, but emetophobia is a very debilitating disorder, but the main obsession is a fear of vomiting. I just said it like 3 times. You're welcome for the exposure if any of you have that. But yeah, fear of throwing up or being sick. So distraction skills. A distraction skill is something that you do in order to avoid doing a compulsion. If you feel an urge to do a compulsion and you feel like if you just stay where you are, you're going to end up doing it, you do something else, another healthy behavior, in order to help yourself not engage in the compulsion. So like if you're having a lot of anxiety, you want to do a compulsion and instead you go spend time with your family, or you start working on an art project, and you're not avoiding the anxiety, but you're avoiding doing the compulsion, and that's the big key there. Habituation, really big deal. Habituation is when your anxiety gradually goes down over time during an exposure in exposure and response prevention therapy, and this will be recorded with the SUD scale. You'll see those numbers gradually going down without doing a compulsion to make it go down. Next, we have hoarding disorder. Hoarding disorder is on here because it's actually an obsessive compulsive related disorder. It's on the spectrum of OCD disorders. It's also called HD. So HD is a problem made up of 3 interconnected difficulties. So hoarding disorder has to do with 3 interconnected difficulties that include collecting items until it impacts the safety of the home, struggling with getting rid of items, and then problems with organizing things. And then there's what we call body-focused repetitive behaviors. It's not on my sheet, but a body-focused repetitive behavior is when someone feels an impulsive urge to do a behavior that has to do with their body. So there's dermatillomania, and that is also known as the skin picking disorder because it makes people want to pick their skin over and over again, even when they do significant damage to their body because of it. And then trichotillomania, which is your hair pulling disorder, where it's essentially the same thing, but you pull on your hair, your eyelashes, your eyebrows, any hair anywhere on your body. You pull on your hair instead of your skin. These 2 are on here because they are highly related to OCD, and again, they're on the obsessive compulsive spectrum. Lastly, we have ACT. ACT is acceptance and commitment therapy, and essentially it does exactly what the name says. It encourages you to accept your circumstances, your feelings, your thoughts, where you are in life, all of that, and move toward your values. Acceptance and commitment therapy is also a type of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's also evidence-based, and it also treats a variety of disorders. Don't you just love therapy? It's very exciting to me. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope that you learned something. Let me know if I missed anything and put it in the comments. I would hate if I did. I really wish I had my favorite sheet, but I don't. So that's that. I have to settle for an imperfect video, which is an exposure for me. I hope you guys learned something and that you're prepared for my exposure therapy series. If you like talking about OCD and OCD-related disorders and exposure therapy, then be sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you can subscribe, and it will literally bring the videos to you every week. Whenever I upload, they will bring you those videos. You can also hit the notification bell. That will give you a notification on your phone or on your computer whenever I upload. It's really amazing, really high tech, really convenient. So click that subscribe button so I can send those videos straight to you every week. Also, if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button. If you disliked it, hit the dislike button. I don't mind. I love the feedback. And if you want to see my exposure therapy series, then be sure to subscribe so you can get all of those videos, and like this video so I know that you're interested in this kind of topic. Bye! So I realized that sometimes I put old things that I couldn't carry around anymore in my filing cabinet. I looked in there, I still couldn't find the glossary, but I did find my old folder, which is nice. I used to carry this back and forth to the hospital like every day for 6 months. It's all drawn over and painted over. Yeah.